enough! Move aside!
Leave me alone, please. What are you waiting for? Do it now!
Her arm twisted hard behind her back and she screamed without shame, boots scraping dirt, breath breaking, teeth bared at the men hauling her forward. She kicked once, wild and sharp, heel catching a shin. One man cursed. Another tightened his grip. "Let go of me," she said, voice hoarse, fighting every inch. "Let go." "You ran again," the taller one said, breath hot near her ear. "You always run." "I won't die in that place," she said. "I won't." They dragged her past the fence line where a small crowd stood back, eyes down, hands still. No one moved. The sheriff leaned against his truck, hat low, watching like it wasn't his job to stop anything. His badge caught the light when he shifted. He didn't speak. "She's unmanageable," the shorter man said. "You know that." "She breaks rules," the other said. "Hurts people." "She hurts when you corner her," a voice said from behind them. The men froze. The grip on her arm loosened just enough for her to breathe. She twisted her head and saw him then, standing close but not touching, a quiet cowboy in a dusted coat, hands loose at his sides. He wasn't tall. He wasn't young. He just stood there like the ground belonged to him. "You know who you're crossing?" the taller man said, turning. "She ain't going," the cowboy said. The words were plain. No threat. No raise. The air changed anyway. The girl felt it first, a stillness that pressed against her ribs harder than any hand. "She's state property," the shorter man said. "We got papers." "She's a child," the cowboy said. "She's trouble," the sheriff said finally, not moving. "Always has been." The girl laughed once, sharp and broken. "Say it again," she said. "Say what I am." "Unmanageable," the taller man said. "See?" The cowboy looked at her then, really looked, eyes steady, face unreadable. "I know who she is," he said. The men shifted. One cleared his throat. The sheriff straightened but still didn't step in. "You don't get a say," the shorter man said. "Not here." "Watch me," the cowboy said. The girl felt the grip on her arm fade. She pulled free and staggered back, chest heaving, waiting for the blow that never came. No one touched her. "The quiet stretch to get back here," one man said, weak now. She didn't move. Neither did the cowboy. The sheriff exhaled slow. "This ain't over," he said. "It is for today," the cowboy said. The men stepped away, muttering, eyes hard with promise. The crowd thinned fast, like they'd never been there at all. The sheriff climbed into his truck without looking back. The girl stood shaking, arms wrapped around herself, anger still buzzing, fear creeping in behind it. The cowboy shrugged out of his coat and held it out, not close enough to trap her, not far enough to insult her. She stared at it like it might bite. "I don't need it," she said. "Take it anyway," he said. She hesitated, then stepped forward and let him drape it over her shoulders. The weight surprised her. It was warm. The men watched from a distance, uncertain now, and for the first time, they didn't move. Her hands clenched in the sleeves, knuckles white. She waited for him to say her name, to ask questions, to make promises. He did none of it. He just stood there with her, shoulder angled like a wall, eyes on the men until they finally turned away. "You gonna take me back later?" she said, low. "When they come again?" "No," he said, "you don't know me." "I know enough." That's what they said too. He didn't argue. The silence sat heavy but not cruel. She felt the ground under her feet steady, like it had decided something. "You got somewhere to be," he said. She laughed, tired. "Nowhere they let me stay." He nodded once. "I got a place." "What's the catch?" "No catch." "That's not real." "It is today." She searched his face for the lie and didn't find it. That scared her more than fists ever did. She pulled the coat tighter and took one step closer, just enough to feel the heat off his arm. The road behind them stayed empty. The men kept watching. She climbed onto the horse before he finished turning away, hands gripping his coat, knees scraping the saddle as she hauled herself up behind him. The horse shifted but didn't protest. Neither did the cowboy. He paused, then swung up in front of her like this was how it had always been. He clicked his tongue once and they started moving, slow and steady, dust lifting behind them. "You gonna turn me in?" she said into his back, voice tight, ready for the answer to hurt. "No," he said. She waited for more. It didn't come. The road stretched out, empty, the town falling away behind them without ceremony. Her heart kept racing like it was waiting for someone to shout. "Why?" she said. "Because you asked me not to." She barked a laugh. "That's it. That's enough." She shifted closer when the horse hit a rut, fingers digging into his coat before she could stop herself. He didn't comment. The silence pressed in, thick and strange, not like the quiet before a beating. This quiet didn't warn. It just existed. "You always listen to runaways," she said. "Only the honest ones." She swallowed. "I ain't honest. You told me you didn't want to go back. That don't mean nothing." "It meant something to me." The words landed wrong. Her chest tightened. Kindness felt like a trick, like a door that slammed once you stepped through. She leaned back a little, putting space between them, testing if he'd pull her closer. He didn't. "So what?" she said. "You hide me. I give you shelter. That's ownership with better words." He shook his head. "Shelter ain't a cage. That's what they all say. I'm not them." She stared at the back of his neck, at the sun-worn skin, the calm set of him. He rode like nothing could rush him. It made her angry. It made her tired. "What do you want from me?" she said. "Nothing." "Stop saying that. It's the truth. No one does nothing." He guided the horse around a bend. Trees thinned. Open land rolled out ahead, dry and wide and quiet in a way that made her nerves jump. No fences yet. No houses. Just space. "You got rules," she said. "Everyone's got rules. I got habits. That ain't the same. They keep me alive." She thought of the orphanage rules, written and shouted and carved into skin. Don't speak. Don't ask. Don't remember. Her hands shook again. She hid them by clutching his coat tighter. "If I run," she said, "you chase me." "No. You let me go." "Yes." "That's stupid." "Maybe." The horse slowed as the land changed, ground turning rougher, path barely there. She could see a low roof in the distance now, dark against the open sky. Her stomach dropped. "That your place?" she said. "Yes." "Anyone else there?" "No." "No one watching?" "No." Her grip tightened without asking permission. The closer they got, the louder her thoughts got. Peace felt like standing on thin ice, waiting for the crack. "You don't even know my name," she said. He didn't turn. "You'll tell me if you want. And if I don't, then I'll still know you're here." The horse stopped at the edge of the land. She pressed her face briefly into his back, breathing him in like proof, then pulled away fast, ashamed of the need. "If this turns bad," she said, "I won't beg." He nodded once. "I wouldn't expect you to." They moved again, slow, toward the quiet waiting ahead. She held on, unsure if she was being saved or claimed, heart pounding all the same. The barn smelled of hay and horse sweat when she followed him inside. Sunlight slanted through the cracks, dust motes drifting like tiny ghosts. He moved slowly, opening doors, pointing out spaces without ceremony. "That room's yours," he said, nodding toward a small upstairs bedroom with a cracked window and bare floorboards. She stared, waiting for a catch, a lock, a list of rules she'd inevitably fail. He just stood there, quiet, letting her take it in. "What do I owe you?" she asked, her voice smaller than usual. "Nothing," he said, tossing a rag over a chair and turning to check the feed in the barn. "That's not how this works," she said, stepping closer, testing the weight of his comb. "It is here," he said, and didn't explain. Her hands twitched. She found a plate in the kitchen corner, one that had been left out to dry. Without thinking, she dropped it on the floor. It shattered, porcelain scattering, sharp edges glinting in the light. Her heart pounded, ready for a lecture, a yell, a slap. He didn't flinch. He knelt, swept the shards into a bucket, humming quietly. "You're lying," she said finally, voice trembling. "No," he said. The quiet pressed in around her, heavy and strange. She wanted to break it, to push him to show anger, to confirm he was real. He moved like he belonged, like the land had taught him patience and nothing else mattered. She felt exposed, weightless in a way that terrified her. "You really gonna let me stay?" she asked. "I'm not stopping you," he said, lifting the last shard into the bucket. She laughed, low and rough. "That's not safe. That's not normal." He didn't answer. He just stood, hands on hips, looking at her as if to say, "This is enough." Later, she wandered outside, boots crunching on dry dirt, toward the well at the edge of the yard. The water shimmered black and quiet, reflecting the sky and her own restless face. Something about it made her uneasy, as if it watched back, remembering things she'd tried to forget. She crouched beside it, fingers brushing the cold stone, imagining the depths holding secrets she didn't want to know. "You see something?" he asked, stepping up behind her, voice soft. "Nothing," she said, though the edges of the reflection seemed wrong, moving too fast, flickering like faces she couldn't place. "Nothing's not always empty," he said. She flinched and pulled back, sitting on the ground, knees pressed to her chest. "I don't like this quiet," she admitted. "Quiet isn't always safe," he said. "But sometimes it's necessary." She shook her head, the thought twisting her stomach. "I don't know how to live like this. Without screaming, without running, without surviving," he said, and for a moment, she stared at him, the words heavy and true. They walked back inside in silence. She helped stack firewood in the corner of the living space, the rhythmic motion calming her racing heart. He showed her how to mend fences, how to carry water, how to lift a bale without letting it crush her arms. Each task felt mundane, ordinary, but it was dangerous in its own way. Dangerous because it made her think about belonging, about peace. Peace was never safe before. She tested him again that night, quietly, breaking a small chair in her room when he wasn't looking. The sound of splintering wood echoed, her pulse spiking, waiting for the wrath she expected. He walked in, didn't speak, and set the broken pieces aside. He placed a blanket on the bed without a word. She stared at him, bewildered. "You really don't care," she whispered. "I care that you're here," he said. That settled her and didn't settle her at the same time. She realized she was watching him as much as he was watching her, studying the quiet routines that felt heavier than shouting. They weren't rules. They were habits that demanded attention, presence, endurance. She didn't know how to exist in such stillness without losing herself. Before sleep, she returned to the well. The water shimmered under the moonlight, black and deep. She knelt and traced the rim with her fingers. She could swear she heard whispers, soft and fleeting, as if the land remembered things she couldn't yet name. She leaned close, eyes on her reflection, heart hammering. Something about that water felt alive, like it had kept her story while the world outside tried to erase it. He stepped up beside her quietly, shadow stretching over the stone. "You don't have to tell me what you see," he said. "I can't stop seeing it," she whispered. "Then don't," he said. She looked at him, wide-eyed. He wasn't pressing, wasn't guiding, wasn't punishing. Just present. Just steady. It was frightening, and she realized she wanted it anyway. Hours passed and the wind settled. Dust drifted through the cracks in the barn and sunlight turned the floor to gold in the early morning. She lay on the bed, thinking of the well, the quiet, the way he moved, the way he didn't try to own her. Her chest ached in a way she didn't understand. She didn't know how to be safe without chaos. But she stayed. She stared at the ceiling, listening to the house creak and sigh, the sound of wind in the rafters, the small noises of a place that felt alive. Her fingers traced the blanket he had set on the bed, heavy with warmth. She realized she had never been given that before. Not permission, not space, not stillness. And it scared her more than the orphanage ever had. Outside, the well reflected the sky, still and dark. She imagined the depth, imagined the echoes it held, and felt herself shiver. The ranch held secrets. She felt it in her bones. She felt them in her chest. And for the first time, she felt watched not with menace, but with attention. Something about that quiet, that habit, that space between words, told her she could be here. And maybe, just maybe, survive. Her eyes closed, and for a moment, the silence pressed on her like a weight, heavy but real. The world outside could wait. The rules, the shouting, the running, they were gone, if only for a little while. And she could breathe. The well waited, dark and patient. The cowboy moved softly behind her, letting her watch, letting her breathe. And for the first time, the girl wondered if she could stay, if she could learn to exist without the chaos that had always defined her. She curled under the blanket, listening to the barn, the land, and the quiet that was slowly becoming home. The night pressed in close around the ranch, thick and almost breathing. She lay in the small room, blanket pulled tight around her, but the quiet didn't soothe. Somewhere beyond the walls, the well whispered, water shifting faintly, carrying echoes that made her stomach twist. She sat up, boots scraping the floor, and pressed her ear to the door, straining for sounds. There was a faint sob, maybe from the wind, maybe not. "Do you hear that?" she asked, voice low, urgent, stepping into the hall. "Hear what?" he replied, appearing at the top of the stairs, eyes steady, calm as always. "Someone crying." "The land does that sometimes," he said, moving beside her. "That's not an answer," she said, arms crossed, hair falling in her face. "It's the only one I got," he said. They moved together toward the well, the moon painting everything silver. She could see the water shimmer black and restless. She knelt beside it, fingers brushing the stone edge. Faces flickered in the reflection, some hers, some not, twisting just enough to make her flinch. She recoiled, heart hammering. "It's watching me," she whispered. He stood behind her, quiet, letting her speak without interruption. "The land remembers," he said. "All the pain, all the loss. It doesn't forget. Sometimes it calls them back." She stared at him, searching his face for mockery, for cruelty, for the trick she expected. There was none. Just stillness, heavy and real. She swallowed, trying to steady her breath. "I don't like it," she admitted. "It feels alive." "It is," he said simply. "Alive with memory. Some people don't notice it. Others, they listen." Her fingers slipped into the water, icy and deep, and she pulled back, shivering. The faces in the well shifted, like smoke in a dark room, twisting with stories she couldn't place. She saw a small girl in a dress too stiff, too white, staring back at her, eyes wide. She jerked her hand away. "That's not real," she said. "Real doesn't have to make sense," he said. She sat on the ground, knees to her chest, rocking slightly. "I dreamed it burning," she said. "The orphanage. Everything. Flames. Screaming. Silence." He crouched beside her, hand on her shoulder, but he didn't force comfort. "It remembers. That's all." She wanted to scream, to hit something, to run. She wanted to be outside of the memory, outside the well, outside the ranch that pressed itself against her chest like a warning. But she stayed. The cowboy didn't move, didn't rush, didn't speak beyond the few words he offered. He let her unravel and stay intact at the same time. Minutes passed, or hours, she had no way of knowing. Dust moved in shafts of moonlight, catching in the air. The well held its secrets, black and patient. She reached again, lifting the bucket from the rope, brushing water off her fingers. There, tangled in the rope, was a small locket. She froze, heart lurching. It wasn't hers, or at least, she didn't think it was, but it felt familiar in her hands, cold and heavy. "Where did that come from?" she whispered, staring at the small gold shape. He crouched beside her, not taking it, just observing. "Things surface when they're ready," he said. She opened it slowly. A photograph inside, faded, a girl in a dress too white, looking straight at the camera. She swallowed, uneasy. I don't know this." "It doesn't mean you can't know it," he said. Her hands shook, the weight of it burning her fingers. She stared at the water, at her reflection, at the impossible depth below. Faces twisted in the black, watching her, judging her, remembering her. She wanted to throw the locket in, but she held it tight, unwilling to let the past vanish yet unwilling to embrace it fully. "Why does it feel like it's calling me?" she asked. "Because it is," he said simply. "Every place remembers. Some places more than others." Her knees pressed to her chest, chin tucked, heart hammering. "I don't know if I can handle it," she whispered. "You don't have to handle it alone," he said. She looked at him, searching for the lie, the trap, the trick. He was still quiet, still steady. No promise. No claim. Just a presence that somehow weighed less than the chaos she carried but more than the silence she feared. The night deepened. Winds stirred in the trees. The well shimmered black and alive, and she stayed crouched beside it, hands wrapped around the locket, mind spinning with memories, dreams, and echoes she hadn't dared name. The cowboy remained behind her, a shadow, a wall, an anchor, not asking her to believe, just letting her see, just letting her feel. Eventually, she rose, legs stiff, and stepped back from the edge. The water darkened and stilled. She breathed, slow, shallow, trying to untangle fear from fascination. The locket burned in her palm, and she knew it would not be the last thing pulled from that depth. He gestured toward the house, voice low. "Time to rest." She didn't move immediately. The well called, whispering, remembering, holding what she could not yet name. She tucked the locket into her coat pocket and followed him inside, the weight of it pressing against her heart. The night outside continued, alive, patient, and waiting for her to listen. In her small room, she sat by the window, staring at the darkened horizon, mind racing with faces, whispers, and fire. The land remembered. She remembered too. The cowboy didn't ask her to forget. He didn't even ask her to understand. He just let her stay, let her listen, let her survive. And that, she realized with a shiver, was more than anyone had ever given her before. The locket pressed into her chest as she lay down. Eyes closed, she imagined the girl inside it, the orphanage, the fire, and the well, black and patient, waiting for stories to surface. The land held its secrets. She held hers. And somewhere between them, she felt a fragile kind of safety. For the first time, she wondered if she could stay long enough to see what might surface next. The ranch settled around her, the night breathing, and the well shimmered outside her window, alive with memory, calling, and waiting. The next morning, the sound of hooves on gravel made her freeze before she saw the figures approaching the ranch. 2 men on horses, one in a crisp uniform, the other in plain clothes, papers flapping in the wind. Her stomach turned. She knew the sheriff and the politician, they had always looked at her like she was a problem to solve, a noise to silence. The quiet of the ranch, the peace she had started to feel, felt fragile as glass. "She's property of the state," the uniformed man called as they rode closer, dismounting without ceremony. "We have orders to return her." "She's a child," the cowboy said quietly, stepping into the clearing, voice low but solid, hands loose at his sides. "She's trouble," the politician said, stepping forward, eyes hard. "Always has been." The girl swallowed, clutching the cowboy's coat. Her heart pounded. I don't want to go back," she said, voice trembling. "She's staying," the cowboy said, his tone still calm but carrying something heavier, something that made the air shift. "You don't get a say," the politician said, slapping the papers against his palm. "Watch me," he said. The papers flapped again in the wind, insignificant and meaningless in that moment. The men stared at him, then at her, then at each other, unsure what to do. The sheriff's badge glinted on the chest of the uniformed man, a silent threat, but the cowboy didn't flinch. Neither did she. "She ran before," the uniformed man said, voice low now, wary. "You think you can keep her?" "I don't think," the cowboy said. "I know." "You can't defy the law," the politician said, voice rising. "She belongs to the state. That's not up for debate." "She belongs to herself," the cowboy said. The girl's hands shook on the fabric of his coat. She had never heard someone speak so plainly and be so dangerous at the same time. It wasn't in yelling or brandishing a weapon, it was in the stillness, the certainty. You can't protect her from what she is, the uniformed man said, narrowing his eyes. She's not yours to define, the cowboy said. The girl stepped forward, heart hammering, fury rising. She never wanted to be defined, she shouted, though the words trembled on her tongue. The two men took a step back, as if surprised by her voice, the fire in it. Enough, the politician barked. This ends now. You're breaking the law. I'm breaking your control, the cowboy said, voice quiet, final. She isn't yours. Silence followed. The only sounds were the wind through the trees and the shallow breaths of horses. The girl realized for the first time that she didn't have to be afraid of every adult, every authority figure, every hand raised to push her down. Some people could hold space without trying to claim her. Some people could protect without asking for thanks. You're out of your depth, the uniformed man said finally, trying to regain authority. Maybe, the cowboy said. But I know who's here. The girl's chest rose and fell quickly. The weight of being wanted, of being seen, hit her full. She wasn't a problem. She wasn't a case. She was a person who had survived. And someone had decided she deserved space to do just that. The politician's jaw tightened. He glanced at the papers, then back at the cowboy. This isn't over, he said. It's over now, the cowboy said, voice quiet and sharp. The uniformed man's eyes flicked to the girl. She met his gaze, unflinching, finally. She didn't look away. I'm staying, she said, and the words weren't a plea. They were a declaration. The sheriff's badge caught the sunlight again, a quiet reminder that the world outside this clearing still had rules, but here, on this land, the rules had shifted. The men stared, uncertain, powerless against the stillness and certainty before them. The girl wrapped herself tighter in the coat, feeling the warmth of someone else's steady presence. The cowboy moved closer, hand brushing hers briefly, not touching, just acknowledging. She realized then that she was safe not because they hadn't tried to control her, but because someone had decided she could exist without being controlled. Let's go, the cowboy said, turning back toward the house. The girl followed, chest still hammering, but her steps lighter. The men lingered, watching, papers in hand, authority meaningless in that moment. The law had arrived, yes, but it had no weight here. As they crossed the yard, the girl's eyes caught the glint of the sheriff's badge one last time. A warning without words, a threat she could choose to ignore. She chose to ignore it. For the first time, she felt a strange sort of calm. Not peace exactly, not safety in the way she had been promised before. But a quiet that wasn't empty, a quiet that was earned. She followed him into the house, shoulders straight, chin high, and something inside her shifted. The past wasn't erased. The world outside wasn't conquered. But here, at this moment, she had a choice. And she was going to take it. The men on the edge of the yard watched until the house door closed, until the girl disappeared from sight. The sun caught the sheriff's badge, then it was gone, swallowed by the heat and dust. The girl and the cowboy stood inside, the quiet of the ranch pressing against her chest like a promise. For the first time, she understood that some people fought without shouting, and some victories were silent. The land held them now, and for the first time, she felt she belonged not to the orphanage, not to the law, not to anyone who had ever tried to define her. She belonged to herself, and to the quiet cowboy who had decided she could stay. The firelight danced across the barn walls, orange and flickering, and she hugged her knees to her chest, staring at the flames. The locket lay in her hand, small and burning from the heat. She twisted it, watching the metal blacken at the edges, trying to burn the past away as though that would make it vanish. She wanted it gone, the memories, the screams, the endless rules she had never agreed to. They said she was wild, the cowboy said, voice low, near the doorway. He leaned against the frame, shadows hiding his face. Your sister, same words. She froze. The fire reflected in her wide eyes. What do you mean? They sent her away, he said, almost whispering. Said she couldn't be tamed. She died that way, alone. Her hands shook. She gripped the locket tighter, then tossed it into the flames. It hissed and blackened, and for a moment she felt like she could hear screaming. The smell of melted metal mixed with smoke, filling the small room. She sank to the floor, shaking, watching it disappear. That's why they do it, he said, stepping closer, crouching so he was eye level with her. They break them because it's easier than facing the truth. Easier than knowing what they made. They said it was my fault, she whispered, voice breaking. They said I deserved it. No one deserves that, he said. Not you. Not her. They just needed to make it look like you did. Tears ran down her cheeks, hot and sharp. I thought I was the problem. You were the solution they feared, he said. Nothing else. Her hands clenched into fists, nails biting into her palms. The fire crackled, shifting shadows across his face, but he didn't flinch. He didn't look away. She had never seen someone hold themselves so steady, even in the face of so much pain. They wanted me to be quiet, she said. To stop yelling, stop running, stop remembering. They always do, he said. But you can't stop what's alive. You remember because it matters. That's what scares them. She pressed her face to her knees, rocking slightly. I hate remembering. You don't get to hate it, he said gently. You get to live with it. And survive it. That's how we win. Her voice cracked. I don't know how. You already do, he said. Every day you're here, you're surviving differently. Stronger. Not like them. Like you. The barn was quiet except for the fire now, the crackling filling the spaces between them. She looked up, eyes wide, chest heaving. I thought fire would burn it all away. It doesn't, he said. It changes it. Gives it shape. Gives it meaning. You let it burn, and you decide what stays and what goes. She blinked at the flames, at the locket twisted into black fragments, smoke curling upward. For a moment, she felt hollow, emptied, but also lighter. The rage, the grief, the fear, all of it pressed into her chest, and she let it sit there, instead of running, instead of screaming. They're scared of you, he said softly. Because you remember too much. Because you refuse to be silent. That's why they hate it. That's why they tried to take you. She swallowed, nodding, tears streaking her face. I don't know if I can do it. You've already started, he said. And if you fall, I'll be here. You won't be alone. The fire hissed again, sending sparks into the air. She watched them drift upward, dancing before vanishing, and she thought about all the things she had carried, the punishments, the walls, the rules, the orphanage, the faces of those who had tried to erase her. She thought about her sister, about the way the cowboy had spoken of her, quiet but steady, full of unspoken grief. For the first time, she let herself weep, fully, letting the sound fill the barn. It echoed against the wood, alive and raw, and she didn't stop. He stayed beside her, hands on his knees, silent and solid. She could hear the memories in her head, the screams and the quiet and the long nights of loneliness, and she let it wash through her, and censored and painful. They told me I was wild, she whispered, voice breaking. But maybe that's true. It is, he said. And that's why you're still here. That's why you survived. That's why you matter. She pressed her face into the floorboards, listening to the fire, listening to him, listening to herself. Rage, grief, and fear spun together, tight in her chest, and she let it sit, heavy and unyielding. Not for punishment, not for shame, but as proof that she had lived. That she was alive. That she could remember. She rose slowly, knees trembling, and watched the last of the locket fragments smolder. Smoke drifted upward, curling against the ceiling beams. She inhaled, the smell of burning metal sharp in her nose, and exhaled, trying to let go of everything the fire had claimed. You understand now, he said softly. They can't take it from you. They can't make it yours to forget. You decide what you carry, what you release, and what you burn. You survived them once. You can survive anything else. She nodded, still shaking, still raw, still trembling with the weight of what she'd lost and what she'd reclaimed. For the first time, she felt the fire inside her match the fire outside, controlled, purposeful, alive. She watched the sparks fade, then glanced at him, I think I can do it. He nodded. Good. Because they'll come again. But you won't be alone. Not this time. The barn was quiet except for the crackle of the dying fire. She stood taller now, chest rising, shoulders back, face streaked with tears and soot. She had burned the locket, the symbol of everything they tried to control. She had faced the grief, the fear, the rage. And she had survived. Outside, the night waited, dark and patient. But inside, she had fire. Inside, she had voice. Inside, she had a choice. And she had him. The fire died down to embers. Smoke trailed toward the ceiling, twisting into the dark rafters. She exhaled slowly, the weight lifting, the rawness of grief softened by the knowledge she was still here, still wild, still alive, still herself. And somewhere in the quiet, the ranch held its breath, waiting for what she would do next. The morning sun spilled over the horizon, gold and heavy, and she stepped out into the yard, boots crunching on dry dirt. The cowboy was already moving, checking the fence line, hands steady on the rail as he inspected posts and wire. She mimicked him, awkwardly at first, swinging a hammer and tightening knots, her fingers blistered and raw. The work was quiet, repetitive, almost meditative, and it made her heart pound in a different way, calm, tethered, not racing with panic or fear. You don't gotta stay, he said, glancing at her from the corner of his eye. I know, she said, her voice tight, uncertain. She moved to the next post, lifting a heavy beam with more force than skill. You want to? He asked. I don't know how, she admitted, dropping the hammer and wiping her hands on her coat. We'll learn, he said. Together. She laughed softly, bitter and short, but it held less anger than before. She watched him move, the way his hands guided the work, not demanding, just showing. It was different from the orphanage. There was no shouting, no list of wrongs, no constant watchful eyes. Just work. Just presence. She carried water from the well, heavy and cold, feeling muscles she hadn't known existed. She fed the animals, cleaned the barn, swept the porch. Each task was small, ordinary, but they gave her control she hadn't had in years. Control without fear. Control without punishment. Control she could see. She realized she had never known that before. You're getting the hang of it, he said quietly, leaning on the post beside her. I don't know if I'm supposed to, she said, setting the bucket down. This feels wrong. Like I'm waiting for it to end. Maybe, he said. But sometimes good things feel dangerous because you're not used to them. Doesn't mean they aren't real. Her hands rested on the rail, gripping it tight. She glanced at the horizon, where smoke from the distant orphanage curled into the sky, pale and thin. Her chest twisted. A part of her wanted to run, to look away, to pretend it didn't matter. But another part, smaller, quieter, wanted to stay, wanted to see if this could be more than temporary, wanted to see if she could belong without losing herself. I think I can call this home, she said finally, the words tasting strange on her tongue. He nodded, a small tilt of his head, no words needed. The work continued, rhythm and repetition, and she followed, learning the movements, learning to exist in a space that didn't demand chaos. She felt her muscles burn, her hands crack, but it was proof of effort, not punishment. Proof that she could act without fear. Later, she leaned against the fence, looking out over the land. The sun was lower now, shadows stretching across the fields. She felt tired in a way that wasn't terror, but satisfaction. She realized she had started to care about the land, about its fences, its animals, its quiet. She had started to belong. You still thinking about leaving? He asked, standing beside her, hands in his pockets. I don't know how, she said, voice small. I never learned to stay. Always ran. Always hid. Always. Survived, he said. I know. And now you can choose differently. She swallowed, blinking against the sun. I think I want to, she admitted. That's enough for today, he said. Tomorrow, we fix more fences. They walked back toward the house, the rhythm of the land pulling them forward. She noticed herself taking smaller, lighter steps, her body moving in tune with the work, her heart slowing. She had survived chaos for so long that calm felt foreign, almost dangerous, but she was learning it anyway. As dusk fell, firelight from the stove inside glowed through the windows, warm and steady. She watched the horizon again, smoke from the orphanage lingering, but this time it didn't fill her with panic. It was distant, not urgent. The work here, the presence of the cowboy, the quiet routines, they were her anchors. That night, she lay in her bed, hands tracing the worn wood of the windowsill, listening to the wind rustle through the trees. She realized she had started calling this place home by accident, without thinking, without rules forcing her. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Somewhere outside, the firelight danced across the barn, shadows long and quiet. The land stretched out, open and patient, and she understood, in a way she hadn't before, that belonging didn't have to feel like chains. She could stay, she could breathe, she could exist in the calm. And for the first time, she felt a fragile sort of peace, threaded with the knowledge that the world outside still waited, but she was no longer running from it. The night held her, steady and still, and she realized she could choose to stay. Tomorrow, she would learn more. She would fix more fences. She would survive differently. But tonight, she just lay in the quiet, the sound of the land breathing through the cracks, and let herself rest. Smoke crawled across the horizon before she even recognized it. At first, it was just a curl, pale and thin, drifting up from the direction of the orphanage. Then the smell hit her: burning wood, scorched earth, metal twisting in heat. Her stomach dropped. Her legs moved before her brain did, and she was outside, boots crunching dry dirt, heart hammering, eyes wide. "They're burning it," she said, voice tight, almost trembling. "They tried," the cowboy said, appearing beside her, calm but tense, eyes fixed on the rising flames. She turned toward him, panic and fury mixing. "Why? Why now? What did they think this would solve?" "They always try to erase what scares them," he said quietly. "But fire doesn't make memory disappear." The wind shifted, carrying the sound of shouting, running footsteps, the crackle of flames. She ran toward the smoke, toward the chaos, heart screaming. The smell of burning wood burned her lungs, her eyes stung. Shadows moved inside the building. A figure stepped into the doorway, face twisted with authority and anger. The matron. "You belong to us," the woman screamed, voice cracking over the roar of the fire. "I survived you," she shouted back, voice raw, echoing across the courtyard. "You never owned me." The matron advanced, pointing a finger like a weapon. "You're nothing without rules." "I'm something you never understood," the girl said, stepping forward. Her boots kicked up embers, her hands trembling with heat and rage. "I remember. I run. I fight. I don't break for you." Gunshots cracked in the distance, the sound sharp and jarring. Horses neighed, startled, hooves pounding. The wind whipped the smoke into her eyes, and she coughed, lungs burning. But she didn't stop. She didn't retreat. The fire surrounded the orphanage like a ring of judgment, and she felt a fierce, strange exhilaration in the chaos. The cowboy moved beside her, rifle in hand, steady, grounding. He didn't yell. He didn't command. He just stood there, letting her rage meet the world, letting her face the past without flinching. "You can't stop what's coming," the matron screamed again, voice shrill. "I don't need to stop it," the girl shouted, stepping closer, eyes wide and fierce. "I need to survive it. I already have." The building shuddered, timbers groaning, walls bending to the heat. Smoke filled her lungs, but she inhaled anyway, letting the fire mark her memory. The flames weren't just destruction, they were proof. Proof that she could confront what had tried to break her. Proof that she could face the system built to silence her, to erase her, and not bow. "You belong to us," the matron shouted again, pointing at her like she could summon the law with a finger. "You never owned me," the girl repeated, louder this time, voice carrying over the roar of fire and smoke. "And you never will." The cowboy's presence beside her was quiet, unyielding. He didn't touch her, didn't shield her, didn't guide her. But she could feel him, solid and constant, a wall behind her that reminded her she was not alone. She could face this. She could survive. Flames licked higher. Sparks flew across the yard. The girl stepped through the falling ash, lungs burning, eyes stinging, adrenaline coursing. She confronted the matron, fearless and unflinching. Rules didn't make you better. Rules only hide fear. I survived you. The matron staggered back, unsure, powerless in the face of the girl's voice. The fire reflected in the matron's eyes, not just the flames but the fury she could not contain. The power had shifted. The world she tried to control crumbled behind her. The girl stood in the chaos, wild and alive, voice ringing over the roar, "I am not yours." Gunshots echoed again, closer this time. But she didn't flinch. She had faced worse than bullets. She had faced silence, shame, punishment, and isolation. Fire was proof that she could endure even the world's violent attempts to erase her. The flames danced across the orphanage, consuming it, smoke thick and suffocating. The girl, chest heaving, eyes wide, hands raw from ash and heat, felt a strange clarity. The system that had tried to break her, the rules that had bound her, the people who had tried to define her, they were all powerless now. She was still here. She was still wild. She was still alive. The cowboy lowered his rifle, hand brushing hers briefly, steadying her. He didn't speak. Words were unnecessary. The fire and smoke in her voice said it all. She had claimed herself. She had faced the place that tried to erase her. She had refused to be quiet. Sirens wailed in the distance, distant consequences closing in. She didn't care yet. The fire had marked her. The past had burned, and she had walked through it, not retreating, not hiding, not begging. The matron stumbled back, eyes wide, powerless. The girl met her gaze one last time. "I survived you," she said, and turned toward the ranch, leaving smoke and chaos behind. Flames licked the sky, painting the world in orange and black. She and the cowboy walked side by side toward the quiet of home, heart pounding, lungs burning, eyes bright. The night held ashen firelight and the echo of a power shift that would not be forgotten. For the first time, she felt it fully. The past could try to destroy her, but it could not claim her. She had faced it. She had survived. And she would survive again. The horizon glowed with distant fire, but she didn't flinch. Not anymore. The world could roar. She had found her voice, and it was louder than any rule, any authority, any system meant to cage her. And beside her, the cowboy rode quietly, steady, patient, unshakable, a witness to her survival, a partner in her defiance, the quiet anchor she hadn't known she needed. The fire burned. She walked on. The air smelled of smoke and ash, drifting down from the distant orphanage, and she shivered, boots crunching over the dry dirt as she followed him across the yard. Investigators had arrived, quiet people in dark coats, asking questions, taking notes, looking at the remnants of fire and chaos, but she kept her head down. She didn't trust the papers, the words, the authority. She only trusted the land beneath her feet and the cowboy beside her. "I won't stop you," he said softly, breaking the silence as they approached the small cabin. She glanced at him, uncertainty tight in her chest. "You want me to stay?" He didn't answer immediately, letting the wind carry the faint smell of smoke across them. Then, quietly, he said, "Yeah." She blinked, unsure if she'd heard correctly. Her chest tightened, a mix of fear and hope. "Say it again," she whispered. "I want you here," he said, voice steady. Her stomach twisted. She had never been chosen. Never truly chosen by anyone who didn't expect obedience or silence. She stared at him, searching for a trick, a test, a condition she would inevitably fail. There was none. Only the quiet certainty in his eyes, the patience in his posture, the unwavering presence that said she belonged if she chose it. She hesitated at the cabin door, hands clutching the edge of the frame. The papers from the investigators flapped on a table inside, meaningless now. She realized she could leave, she could run, she could return to the chaos and authority of the orphanage or any place that wanted to control her. But she also realized she could stay. She could exist without fear, without running, without being defined by the rules of others. Her fingers brushed the pen the cowboy had placed on the table. Adoption papers. quiet, official, but not coercive. He had offered her a choice, not a cage. She swallowed hard, heart pounding, and picked up the pen, hand trembling. I don't know if I can, she whispered. You already can, he said. You've survived everything else. This is just one more choice. One more way to say yes to yourself. Her hand hovered over the paper, indecision churning inside her. She took a deep breath, feeling the wind brush across her face, smelling smoke and ash and earth and the faint, steady scent of him. This was her chance not to obey, not to flee, not to survive as a shadow, but to live as herself. Finally, she pressed the pen to the paper, signing her name slowly, deliberately, letting each letter anchor her to this place, to the choice she had made. She paused, heart-hammering, breath-catching. It was real. She had decided. She had chosen. The cowboy watched quietly, hands in his pockets, eyes steady. He didn't smile or praise her. He didn't need to. The act itself carried all the weight, all the proof. She had chosen. She had belonged. She stepped back, letting the papers settle on the table. The sun had lowered, casting long shadows across the cabin, the yard, the land that stretched endlessly around them. She felt the weight of history, of fire, of authority, of escape. And she felt lighter. Not free exactly, not yet, but tethered to something steady, real, chosen. I'm here, she said softly, almost to herself, almost a question. You're here, he said, voice low, confirming, not commanding. She looked out the window at the distant horizon, at the smoke that still lingered from what had tried to break her, and for the first time, she didn't feel fear. She felt clarity. She felt possibility. She felt a strange sort of peace threaded through the chaos she had endured. The investigators moved quietly outside, unaware of the small decision made inside the cabin. The papers on the table were real. She had signed them. She belonged here. She could stay. She could breathe. She could exist without running, without hiding, without fear. The wind whispered through the trees, rustling the edges of the cabin, carrying the faint scent of smoke and earth and survival. She let herself sink into the quiet, into the decision she had made, into the knowledge that she had chosen herself for the first time in her life. The cowboy stepped beside her, hand brushing hers briefly, a small acknowledgement, a tether. She didn't need more than that. She had signed her name. She had chosen to stay. She was home. And outside, the land waited, patient, alive, and wide, ready to hold her. For the first time, she believed that some things, love, choice, belonging, didn't have to end. She had survived, and she had stayed. The horizon glowed faintly with remnants of the past, but she didn't flinch. She had made a home of the present. She exhaled slowly, chest rising and falling, and felt the weight lift just a little. She was still wild. She was still alive. And now, she was here. The cowboy didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence said enough. Together, in the quiet, in the wind, in the home they had built without words, they simply existed. And for the first time, that was enough.